name is Shannon Baxevanis. I'm from New York Transco. New York Transco is a private developer. We solely focus on improving the electric transmission grid here in New York. We are a New York company. We have a New York focus, and we want to make sure that the New York electric transmission system is serving all New Yorkers, no matter what the conditions are, in a way that is equitable, effective, affordable, and consistent throughout the region. We own approximately 120 miles of electric transmission throughout the state of New York, as well as several substations. And we are working on a number of innovative solutions throughout the state right now to improve that system for the future. And we're going to talk about one of those projects today. But we're going to back up a little bit. I'm the kickoff here to kind of lay some groundwork on transmission, electric transmission, which is not something we typically think about every day, but is certainly key to how we are running this webinar today and all of the facets of our daily life. So what is electric transmission? We'll start off with the basics to get everybody acclimated to the right place. Electric transmission is kind of the intermediary step between where power is made and where power is consumed. So we have all of these generating sources throughout the state and beyond that are creating the power. And obviously we're in the process right now in New York State of transitioning that power into clean sources, renewable sources. And that power needs to get to its destination, which is all of our homes and businesses throughout New York State. And the way that it goes from where it is created to ultimately where it is used is through the electric transmission system. And throughout the state of New York, there's approximately 11,000 miles of electric transmission that's serving us day in and day out. It's in a multitude of forms, which include overhead transmission lines, which we typically see in places like upstate New York. You can see pictures of those poles on the diagram in front of us. Or they can be underground lines, which is prevalent in urban areas, more densely populated areas, where we have it going underneath public roadways and in rights of way throughout different areas within our communities. And those are connected by substations. And substations have a single function, which is to increase or lower voltage depending on the circumstance. And then ultimately this gets pushed out to our homes and businesses. And there's a lot going on with transmission today. As I mentioned, as we're transitioning in New York into a cleaner grid. And some of this is all kind of coming together at once. So we have an aging system, and I think we all experience this every day with infrastructure. There's aging infrastructure throughout New York State. Transmission is also aging. About 80% of New York State's electric transmission network went into service before 1980. New York Transco has replaced assets that were over 100 years old on the system recently. So there's a lot of aging infrastructure that we need to deal with. We also have growing demand. As we move toward electrification and as we put more heat pumps in electric cars and we plug in more devices, we are growing the demand on the system. This is exacerbated by things like AI and data centers. And it's estimated that New York State's demand for electricity will grow 50 to 90% over the next 20 years. So that's pretty significant. Then if we add in all of the policy changes that we're making in order to have a cleaner environment and to make sure that we are combating climate change, we have some demands that are being put on the system that weren't envisioned when it was built decades ago. And then there's two other things that are really challenging the transmission system. Extreme weather. Again, we look at climate change. Our climate is changing. We're confronted with more hurricanes and ice and snow and other challenges to the system. And we need to make sure that the system is robust to handle things on blue sky days or in the worst of storms. And then congestion. The system is plagued in certain areas with congestion, just like a roadway. Think of it in that sort of way, where you're sitting in a highway in traffic and you're bottlenecked up. It's a log jam of cars. The same thing's happening on the transmission system. The electrons are jammed up and have nowhere to go because there's simply not enough lanes in the system to move it. So we're looking at fixing all of these things by adding in new capacity to the electric transmission system and improving it in order to solve these challenges, but also to create opportunities in all of the communities that we live in, which really come from boosting the economy, supporting local jobs, working with union partners to make sure these projects get built, operated, and maintained for the long term, and ultimately creating an environment that is suitable for our families to grow and thrive in the long term. So there's a lot going on in New York, and there's many different organizations working on improving our electric transmission system for the betterment of all communities. And what you see on this map is from the state's grid operator, the New York Independent System Operator. And you can see these dashed lines. These dashed lines show areas, pockets where we can build more renewables, where it's fertile ground for expanding the transmission for more renewable generation, which will clean up our environment. The challenge is we have constraints on the electric transmission system. So we got to build this generation, but then we have to move it to population centers where it will be used. And the constraints on the transmission system are noted in some of those big circles. And the New York Independent System Operator studies this all the time, and organizations like New York Transco or the New York Power Authority are working on implementing solutions to these challenges. The good news is that the state is looking at things very holistically, and there's a lot of opportunities already being advanced forward in the form of transmission upgrades, transmission build out, so that we can make sure that generation resources that are coming online, clean ones, have a way to get to customers. There's a multitude of projects, which you can see up there, different names of these projects that have been built or in the process of being built, or in a permitting phase. And really, we're already advancing this clean energy future that will benefit all communities live, real time today. We're going to talk to you about one of those projects, Propel New York Energy. I'm going to give you some of the highlights of what we are doing with that project, and Kaela is going to talk about a different perspective. But the Propel New York Energy project is one of the electric transmission projects that is moving forward here in New York State. It is a collaboration between New York Transco and the New York Power Authority, so a great public-private collaboration to advance this key infrastructure project. This project came about as the result of an identified need by the New York State Public Service Commission and was ultimately selected through a competitive solicitation by the New York Independent System Operator to build approximately 90 miles of new electric transmission across portions of Suffolk County, Nassau County, Queens, the Bronx, and into Westchester County. So this is all new electric transmission. It is all underground. We do have some submarine cabling components. And the reason for this project is really to boost the electric transmission backbone, to make sure that we have the strengthened core infrastructure in place that ensures that our lights go on each day, that we can charge all of our devices, but also that it relieves the congestion and the challenges that are on the existing transmission system so that more clean energy can flow efficiently and effectively and economically to customers throughout the region and beyond. This is a long-term project. It is a large investment in the communities. We are thrilled to be advancing it forward. We're right now in the permitting phase of the project with an application in front of the New York State Public Service Commission. And we're looking to get into construction in mid-2026 to put the project in service by May 2030. A core element of what we are doing on the project is community engagement, is education, is talking to folks about the career opportunities that stem from projects like Propel New York Energy. This is, again, a large infrastructure project. It's a large investment. It will be built in collaboration with New York State Labor, but there's a whole host of jobs and opportunities that come about from investments like this. Both New York Transco and the New York Power Authority have been going around and talking about this in some of the local communities that our project traverses. And we're showing an example here and at the Bronx Community College, where we shared information about all of the career aspects. And it's really critical that we are looking at this from the lens of an equitable transition and looking for opportunities for the next generation of folks to come in and take advantage of projects like Propel New York Energy. We are thrilled to be sharing all of this information. We look forward to more details, but keep in mind this project is averaged to support about 2,000 jobs during the 4-year construction period each year, and will put about a $2.4 billion boost into area goods and services. So that's supporting a lot of ancillary job opportunities throughout the region, which is very exciting. And I know Kaela is going to talk to you a little bit more about how we're working with the disadvantaged communities in the area and some of the future opportunities that we see on the horizon. But there's a plethora here to explore with an investment like Propel New York Energy. And we want to have a dialogue to learn more about the priorities in the community. So I'm going to turn it over to Kaela, who's going to get into a few more details about what the New York Power Authority is working on and our collaboration on Propel.
Thank you, Shannon. And thank you, Charles, for inviting us to speak at this panel. Can everyone hear me? Thumbs up. Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
you're good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon again. My name is Kaela Mainsah. I'm the Vice President of Environmental Justice at the New York Power Authority. I wanted to briefly just let people know a little bit about NYPA in case you are not familiar. We are the largest state public power organization in the nation. We generate nearly 25% of New York State's electricity. And the bulk of our customers, we do not have residential customers. The bulk of our customers are governmental. So state, city, and municipal level government. We also supply power to governmental entities like the MTA, like SUNY and CUNY. More than 80% of our generation comes from clean, renewable hydropower. So we operate the large power plants in Northern New York, Central New York, and Western New York. And I just wanted to also add that NYPA Power supports economic development by providing low-cost power to businesses as part of a commitment to create or retain statewide jobs. So the next slide, please. I just also wanted to talk a little bit about my job at NYPA is to lead environmental justice. And for us, this really means supporting those communities that have been designated as environmental justice by the state entities and also at the federal level. So those communities that are historically excluded communities that host our statewide operations. So 7 years ago, we made a recommitment. We did a listening session with community leaders asking, some input into program design. And really it falls into some broad buckets around public education programs from the school level. As you can see, this is a STEM camp that we did at El Puente in Brooklyn. STEM level, sort of school level to the adults, building that more inclusive pipeline of future energy leaders, and providing opportunities to participate through scholarships, paid internships, clean energy internships. So people were prepared to be able to access some of the investment that Shannon was talking about. The second bucket is about community projects, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But finally, the last bucket is really about meaningful engagement with environmental justice leaders, community leaders, so that we could take back their concerns and promote energy equity into NYPA operations. Next slide, please. So finally, in relation to the Propel New York plan, I really wanted to talk a little bit about how NYPA envisions that the Propel project means for just clean energy transition for New York. My colleague did a really good job of, Shannon, of describing the Propel New York route and the compelling need to increase grid resilience. She also talked about the amount of engagement we've done with community leaders, legislators, faith-based organizations, unions, and we took all of that information to really understand how we could meet some of that needs. Obviously, the project has intrinsic project benefits in terms of the investment, the economic impact, and the jobs, but we were looking for to do more for communities, and it was imperative that the communities that intersect with our route were the primary beneficiaries of the investments. So we're looking for active ways to do that. And it was actually Shannon that identified the opportunity from the Department of Energy's Office of Grid Resilience. And the environmental justice team applied at NYPA, and we were successful in receiving up to $43 million in transmission siting and economic development funding. So we have $43 million approximately from the DOE, and then NYPA has a cost share of about $3 million. So that's about $46 million of investment for communities, directly for communities. And as we know, the clean energy transition is still in its beginning stages. A fully realized renewable energy economy that's inclusive of all communities is really a marathon. But the Propel New York Sustainable Communities Initiative, it's an approach that encapsulates some and many of the elements that can lead to a clean energy just transition. So the components of the program really involve community energy projects. So we're hoping to do projects with community, in collaboration with community institutions, with community leaders. We have a year of planning. We're in the middle of negotiation with the Department of Energy. There is a 120-day negotiation process where we talk about our plan and then they approve it. And then we see how much of the $43 million we get. So hopefully we get all of it. Those community energy projects are really supported by clean energy training, internships, career programs, scholarships, a lot of supply diversity outreach, events and workshops, so that we can ensure that we're raising awareness about the ways in which the transition to a clean energy economy supports climate change mitigation. So as I said, this is a step to address some of the complex and cumulative effects that communities are burdened with. It's also a response to the outreach that we heard and some of the challenges and the programs that we heard in our outreach. And we really are about bringing more resources and completing projects that would not otherwise be completed. So thank you.
Thank you very much for those wonderful introductions. So next we have up is Erik.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to share the screen. And thanks for the great overview and for facilitating, Charles. So I'm going to just share a little bit about Orsted and offshore wind. So I work on workforce development programs and strategy, as well as environmental justice. So kind of have that equity and community-based lens on how offshore wind works. But this, at a high level, is really about creating that generation capacity, clean energy generation capacity that's going to be transmitted through the lines that Kaela and Shannon were just speaking about, right? So we're proud to report that this past March 2024, we finished South Fork Wind, which is New York's first offshore wind farm. You see it here on this slide. That it's 132 megawatts worth of power. It's about 35 miles east of Montauk Point. And just as a kind of illustrative point here, that originally the turbines were spaced out there in the ocean as we normally would. But we heard concerns from fishing groups, stakeholder groups, community groups, tribal groups that they were too close together for essentially navigation. So instead, we've actually spaced out the turbines at a 1 mile by 1 mile grid apart from each other, which allows for ocean users to use them much more effectively. And I don't know if you've ever kind of looked at what a nautical mile looks like, but it's a pretty big distance. So it makes it a much more kind of responsibly sited project. And we try to carry that kind of attitude and process forward with everyone we engage with, in Long Island with folks like Dan, in New York City with folks like Charles, and everyone in between. So so that's South Fork Wind. We're really excited about the clean energy that's putting on the grid. And then we are currently under construction with what's going to be New York's second offshore wind farm, which is called Sunrise Wind, a much larger project, about 7 or 8 times the size in terms of generation capacity as South Fork Wind. That'll be completed in 2026 and generate 800 direct jobs, we predict. We also have a big range of different grant commitments that are going to come with that project and are really focused on delivering benefits in line with what the state of New York calls disadvantaged communities, what you and I might call environmental justice communities. And so making sure that at least 40% of those benefits of the project come to environmental justice communities, and that we work hand in hand with folks that have been most overburdened by the climate crisis, by the fossil fuel economy, and other structural challenges. So we're really excited about these two projects, and I want to just put Orsted in kind of the larger context as well. So we're a global offshore wind company and renewable energy developer. We also develop solar and land-based wind as well as batteries. But we're most known for our leadership in the offshore wind world. We used to be a company called Danish Oil and Natural Gas, so Danish company, of course. But in the mid 2000s, there was a movement in Denmark to divest from oil and natural gas. It's a quite low-lying country. They really feel the impacts of climate change quite intimately, and so that movement basically pushed Danish oil and natural gas to divest from the fossil fuel assets that they had. So as of, I think it's maybe a month ago or so, the latest number that we had is that 99% of our revenue now comes from renewable energy. So it's basically in its own kind of micro way, a just transition in the form of one company shifting from one of the most fossil fuel intensive companies in the West to being a pure play renewable energy company. And that's not enough, right? I mean, we all know that that taking peaker plants and natural gas generation facilities offline is going to disproportionately help environmental justice communities, but that's not the only thing that we need to be considering, right? So when we talk about citing a project or delivering jobs from a project, we're always super focused on making sure that we're in communication, trusted communication with environmental justice communities, and that we have initiatives that are prioritizing the inclusion of those folks in both the contracting opportunities and job opportunities that come from the project. So I don't want to steal Dan's time, so I'll leave it there, and we'll talk more as the rest of the panel goes forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Erik. Charles, should I just jump right in?
You got it, my friend.
All right. Sounds good. So good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Lloyd, and I'm representing an organization. We are based out of Long Island, and we are a youth development organization called Minority Millennials. Our mission is to help young people of color access jobs, build wealth, and become civically engaged. We were founded in 2017, and the focus of that foundation at the start and to this day is still our heartbeat is around civic education. We truly believe that anybody, specifically young people of color, we focus on 16 to 38. If they understand the power of being civically engaged and civically active, that opens up the doors to many personal and professional opportunities, and more so just gives them the power that a lot of structural inequities and racism has taken away from individuals. So we focus on civic engagement, and that completely aligns with one of our programs that we're going to talk about today is Civic Works. And that program is dedicated to empowering underserved communities through comprehensive civic education and workforce development initiatives. And so while we're talking to youth and young adults about being civically engaged, the principles of Civics 101 and just how local politics works, local government, and why it's important to be active and utilize a strong voice to ensuring that the community is getting the proper benefits from a number of different regional projects. We're also explaining to them, depending on what they're looking to get into, how to navigate and get into direct entry construction labor programming. So it's a combination of both. We're really trying to get them to get that mindset of and that processing of getting involved. Again, if they're looking for a skills trade, to be active, to have the discipline to really show up and make sure they're taking full advantage of the opportunities that are coming across their community and across their desks. The second program that we really developed out of the civic education was workforce development. While we were having our community organization meetings and groups, there was two things that was quite clear. Most of the people that came to our events that are now members were looking for jobs or were looking to advance in their existing career or job. Also, our corporate partners or local partners were then looking to diversify their workforce. So we became a natural conduit, so to say. And so our workforce development program, we do not do hands-on training, but we do soft skills, resume building, and recruitment. So we help with recruiting of diverse talent for a number of different industries. But today we're going to focus on the green economy. One thing that Erik always says, and we've seen this firsthand though, is that while we're training individuals, specifically youth and young adults, again, on how to be civically engaged and how to access the number of different job and career opportunities that are coming across the region, if they're prepared for offshore wind or for other projects, most likely to have the skill set to maneuver whatever door and opportunity is coming across them. The third program we have is the Next Gen Supplier Diversity, and that's really focused on establishing next generation minority businesses ages 18 to 38 to get their NWE state certification and take full advantage of a number of different procurement opportunities. So we do an entire curriculum with them. It's about an 8-week program. As many of you know on this call, it takes at least a year of tax returns to get your business certified. So it's usually about a 1 to 3 year process of making sure that they're able to become at least a tier 3 business and be able to get a local procurement or regional procurement opportunity with some of the regional projects that are going on. And that is our 3-tiered ecosystem, and something that we feel has been really, really valuable to our demographic on Long Island. And we're excited to talk about this further on in this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate that insight. So since we have everybody here, I have my first leading question. And anyone is able to answer it, that's fine. Anyone like to answer it, that's fine. And if no one answered, I'll pick somebody. How are you going to ensure robust community engagement and equity benefits for disadvantaged communities in the projects that you are managing?
So I can start with that, and maybe Kaela, you could fill in a little bit. As it relates to what we are doing on Propel New York Energy, the lens that we view community engagement is to bring information to where people are and how they digest it. So that means a multitude of approaches, but it's having a team of folks that can go into the communities, participate in street fairs, participate in National Night Out, go to schools and share information. Go to local sporting events and share information, really get out the word about what these projects entail, why they're important, and what the opportunities are for the community at large. So that is the perspective that we take, and we're using, all of the mediums and medias that are available to us to make sure that those messages can resonate. It includes making sure we have translation and interpretation services, particularly in certain communities along our route. We see the project as the foundation for making sure that the community voice is reflected in all that we're doing. And then as it relates to the DOE opportunity that Kaela mentioned, that the whole reason we even pursued that was to look for additional outside of the box opportunities so that we could engage with the community and build something more than just the transmission project.
Yeah. And I just want to ask you a question, because before the money came from DOE, there was really just engagement, right? There was not really a serious plan to involve those communities, right? Because it wasn't part of your plan in the beginning, or was it?
It's always been a part of our plan right from the beginning, even before we were awarded the project through the New York Independent System Operator process. We were out engaging at the local level because we wanted to gain feedback that we could incorporate into our project proposal. And that is something that's ongoing. We're in permitting right now, which is a public process. It includes a lot of engagement. And ultimately, what we are doing is taking any feedback that we are receiving and trying to see how that can be reflected in the project outcome. So it's always been a priority of ours, and it always will be, because it is fundamental for these projects that do go through communities and really are a part of the backbone of our day-to-day life.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Shannon. Anybody else wants to address this question?
I'll just add briefly that it's important to set targets to set targets in conjunction with the communities that we're talking about. Obviously, NYSERDA and the CLCPA has done amazing work in that's really been driven by environmental justice movements, especially including We Act. But those targets that We Act and other groups have pushed the state to set, of the 40% benefit target primarily, gives developers and other kind of entities that are doing this work a benchmark to hit. So I would say, start with that and say, okay, how are we doing stacking up against that goal? So for example, when we put together a job training program for union workers to go offshore and do the offshore work on Sunrise Wind, we set a target for disadvantaged communities that lines up with that, so that when those folks will actually go out to work, then not only do you have union members, not only do you have New Yorkers, but you have folks in that workforce that are from those communities, and then bringing those wages back to their communities directly.
Okay. Dan, how do you feel in addressing this question? What are some of the gaps that you're maybe seeing in community outreach that may be improved by different organizations that you see?
Yeah, I think a huge component is always making sure that this information is continuously being presented and getting in front of the communities that need to hear this the most. It's similar to commercials on national television back in the day, or even YouTube ads or social media paid accounts. Big companies will spend millions of putting the same ads in front of people because they know the more times they see it, the more time it resonates. Unfortunately, a lot of times when we're working with DACs or underserved communities, there's a lot going on within that individual or that community or that family. So they may see an opportunity for a job training, or they may see an opportunity to get their business certified for procurement, but there's 99,000 things going on. So they need to see it another 50 times. And so it takes not only the partnership between a community-based organization like ourselves, but a Propel or Orsted to really work together and to make sure, to Erik's point, that that target or metric is being met, and that we're continuously staying in front of the community, and also just being kind of innovative around this. We talked about this before, Charles, but we also operate a basketball tournament, and a huge majority of the people that play and come to that tournament are the same individuals that we would love to get this information in front of. So it's, while we're talking about regular things and student athletes, it's hey, did you hear about this job opportunity for a direct entry program? Did you hear about how to get your business certified? Trucking is a huge thing right now. Well, what does that look like to get your trucking company certified, and then to try to get a procurement opportunity to supply different materials across the region? And what does that timeline look like? Making sure that it's not just 3 conversations, it's going to take 8 to 10 conversations. So there's a lot of time commitment and capacity that goes into this. And that's really more on the accountability of organizations like Minority Millennials and those grassroots organizations, to not only hold the corporations accountable, to hold ourselves accountable, that we're getting these people into the door and making sure that they're taking full advantage of what that looks like. So it's a full ecosystem of working together, and it could get tiring. Anybody that's on this call and does this work knows that it does tend to be a lot of pressure to make sure you're getting both ends of this work done. But that's also why there needs to be budgets to hire the capacity and the team and the personnel to keep this going.
Sure. I'll just really just echo what Dan said. At NYPA, we have this long history of engaging with communities and meeting them, to Shannon's point, meeting them where they are. So we have a team of about 10 environmental educators. We go to churches, we go to refugee centers, we go to community-based organizations, senior centers, just really talking about what does the energy infrastructure that's within your community look like? And to the point that you just made, there are a lot of things that are going on in communities that are underserved. And so when you're talking about infrastructure, that might not be the first thing that you're talking about. We engage with a lot of NYCHA residents as part of NYCHA's Clean Energy Academy. And so trying to translate this is a potential job that, you know, we would love for you to be a part of, and a potential career pathway is something, as you said, really meet the residents and the different stakeholders exactly where they are in innovative ways. If it's a STEM camp, it's a church, part of what the community-based organization is already doing, it's the additional support that we can provide. And to the point that you made, all of it has to be community-led, because the community leaders have the solutions and have the direct relationships, so that we can access and make sure that we're reaching as many parts of the community where they are in different languages at the right time, providing childcare, providing food, if it's an after-school a camp, for instance, just making sure that it's kind of a holistic approach. Charles, I think you're muted.
Before we wrap up this question, does anyone want to add anything that they want to talk, anything else they want to add before we move on to the next question?
I would just say one thing, on the education piece, I think we often focus on high school level or those that maybe are entering into college. And I think Dan was really getting to this, and Kaela too. We need to start earlier, and we need to make sure that we don't forget about the adults that maybe are looking for a career change or better opportunities. And so that we're kind of hitting it at all levels to make sure that we're fully inclusive in sharing details about the energy economy and the transition and all that it affords from a career perspective.
Yeah.
Yep, and I totally agree. Dan, you want to say something? Then
Just real quick, that's a great point. We'll probably talk about this a little more down the road, but obviously when they're younger and they're in middle school or high school, there's a little more of a time gap to where they can prepare for these jobs. And so when we speak specifically, again, more on union labor jobs, that's really sometimes 2-3 years down the road. They have to go through a lot of different trainings, and those seats for that training has to open up. So I think it's just also being mindful and upfront of the timeline between when these individuals will actually be able to get into some type of paid career or paid job, because not all trainings are paid. So the timing in these discussions when we're talking to individuals is really key too, because one of the things that has happened to us as an organization, I've had to learn this the hard way, is you tell somebody that there's going to be a job, this is a great thing, sign up, then they contact you every day for the first 2 weeks, but we don't have the job. Then after those first 2 weeks, they don't really follow up, and then 9 months later, it's very hard to get in contact with that same person.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's always the hurry up and wait situation that we are approaching in all these jobs. Even with this, and when we know Propel is not going to be until 2026, we're talking about it, but we know that it's going to be a while. But the hurry up and wait situation is, we all face that. So we just got to be mindful of that process. Go ahead, Erik, and then I'm
Can I yeah, sorry to belabor the point, but I think, you both raise a really important dynamic that, you all are probably tired of hearing me say on various panels, but I think it's really important to say again that, building on that, offshore wind careers are a very hot topic. It's a cool sounding job. It's, it contains kind of the future of a zero carbon grid for the coastal regions of New York and other states. And so people are excited. Let's go and get these offshore wind jobs. But to Dan's point, to get an offshore wind job, you have to have some prior experience, generally speaking. 35 miles off the coast, 3,000 ton components, voltage that you don't really see on projects other than a transmission line like that. I mean, this is serious stuff. And so you don't go to an offshore wind job typically as your first job. So there has to be this balance, I think, for us as advocates and folks who are working with job seekers to say, that's amazing that you're excited about this. Let's take this intermediate step to get that electrical training or get that engineering training or get that project management training, get that work experience now, so that when, the next offshore wind project comes in 2028 or 2029, you've got 4 years of experience under your belt and you're well positioned to have that offshore wind job. But that doesn't really make or break your larger career arc that you're in as one of those key elements. So it's a bit about maintaining that excitement, but also helping with that hurry up and wait game that Charles is correctly referring to, and saying, like, there's actually something you should do now. It may not be as exciting to you to wire a school or wire an office building, but it is the thing you should do now.
Right, and those are the skills that we have to continue to develop our young people with. All right, the next questions. What do you consider community benefits, and how are you ensuring that Justice 40 and equity goals in New York climate law are fulfilled? Who would like to tackle this questions? What do you consider community benefits?
Well, I can
I can
take it.
start if,
Okay.
oh, go ahead, Kaela.
No, go ahead, Erik. No problem.
Okay, sure. So community benefits take a wide range of forms. I'll just list a couple, and then if there are comments or questions, then we can go into them. First is going to be obviously workforce development programs. That's kind of where I live. Getting training and support services so that folks can actually get jobs, and then of course the jobs themselves, if those jobs are indeed located in the host community. We also look at MWBE contract, making sure that those business opportunities are going to not just businesses in the neighborhoods where we're hosting infrastructure, but also those businesses that are owned and run by women or people of color. And then, of course, what we call host community agreements, which is typically some sort of fund. Usually, it's essentially a tax fund or payment in lieu of taxes to a local government, where we're basically offsetting the burden of having this infrastructure, called a converter station or an underground cable line, in the town where we're delivering energy. So that would also count as a community benefit. And then there's a bunch of other kind of creative approaches that you can take: park maintenance, or redevelopment of public space, or we obviously in the Bronx, we had talked about some innovative stuff around truck charging to reduce emissions there. So anyway, there's a lot of forms you could put it in, but really what it means is direct monetary benefit to the community where you're doing work.
So just to add to that, I think the question, as you asked it, Charles, was talking about ensuring that the Justice 40 equity goals were met. So Justice 40 kind of aims to, 40% of the benefits of energy spending to flow to low-income, disadvantaged communities or underserved communities. So in terms of the Propel New York line, and also the TSET grant, we really use the state and the federal climate justice screening tools to analyze and to identify the communities to ensure that we were reaching our target audience. And for the TSET grant, we focused all of our program proposals in for disadvantaged communities. So it's not 40%, it's 100% is our goal, to make sure that the 4 communities that are DAC communities that are directly impacted by the route are the ones that benefit first and benefit completely. And so we see community benefits to the point that Erik meant pretty much just bringing more resources to the communities that are most impacted by energy infrastructure. And what does that look like? For TSET in particular, we wanted to make sure that we had local community projects. And we looked at partnering with local schools, housing authorities, community-based organizations, so that they could be a tangible benefit, a clean energy project, whether it's HVAC, whether it's renewable energy. We still have to talk about, in collaboration with the community, so that at the end, when we leave after Propel, there is a project that benefited the community. And on top of that, we want to make sure that we have that clean energy education. It talks a little bit about the fact that some of these renewable energy projects and jobs are not the first job you do. So we'll bring some of our historical programs, like paid internships for community college students and high school students, so that they're building that resume. If they've worked at NYPA or they've worked at Transco, Con Ed, National Grid, Orsted, if they have that resume that they're building, starting from high school at the community college level, they'll be more eligible to apply for that job when it comes to it. Because as part of our paid internships, we make sure that they complete a project. And so they'll have a robust resume, that's what we're trying to build, that pathway that makes them eligible. And so we also have those diverse supplier opportunities to the point that Dan was making, how do we support that pathway and that network of diverse suppliers, small businesses, to make sure that when these big projects come, they are ready. And we have a whole host of different ways that we support suppliers, which we'll talk about later, so we don't.
Dan, you want to
Good night.
respond? Yeah. Or
Yeah, no, I love both what Erik and Kaela mentioned. And I think I'll just throw a little rock in the pond here, but community benefits has been something that has been around for quite some time, especially when we're talking about how is it benefiting communities that have been impacted by a number of different issues and social structures. So for us, and again, when I say this, I'm always being very mindful of the accountability for minority millennials, because we are in this game now. And if you look at some of the communities that we focus on, from Wyandanch to Hempstead to Lakeview to Westbury to any of the communities that their zip codes show that there's a huge disproportionate resources in education and income, how can we track that these community benefits are helping those numbers go up in the next 5 to 10 years? So for us, that's what we would like to see with Justice 40 and all the money that's coming from this climate investment with this new green industry. So it's kind of like, in a way, saying that we want to start fresh, because a lot of the community benefit agreements have been received. Well, we don't really know or kind of see how that has helped some of these communities advance in the things that we talked about. Is the high school graduation rate gone up? Has the income for these communities gone up? And if it's new development, are the individuals that live there, have they had to been displaced? Has there been gentrification? So these are all the things that we want to take into consideration when we talk about community benefit agreements. Now, it's not just solely on the green economy and the corporations, both public and private, to solve this problem, but because there's so much money going into these communities from this industry, we do feel like some of those metrics should be accounted for in the next 5 years. So it's 2024. We're looking to get a huge goal by 2030. So by 2030, we should see if Hempstead was at 51%, it has now gone up. Wyandanch was at 60% graduation. Has it gone up by 80%? And what part of that was from this investment in the green economy?
before I say anything,
Just
does
wanna
anyone
add-
want to respond?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have, go ahead, Erik, you go, and then I have a different angle I want to talk about community benefits from.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, very specific point, to build on what Kyla was saying, and you're absolutely right as well, Dan. But when you talk about jobs with Propel or jobs with Orsted, that's great. And we definitely want to hire folks directly. We do all the time. I think the really important thing for advocates to understand and for community members to understand is that developers are hiring probably 5 or 10% at most of the people that are working on these projects. This is all, a lot of this stuff is subcontracted out to construction contractors, maintenance contractors, contractors to those contractors, manufacturers, suppliers. And so really important, I think, to use us as a point of contact to try to unscramble that net of what the suppliers look like, but don't have community members just try to get a job at Orsted. We'd love to do that, but you're missing 90% of the jobs if you do that.
Okay, then Shannon, then I'll.
Yeah, so actually what Erik said kind of tags on to what I was going to say. So I think there's another aspect of community benefits that we don't always look at, which is a few different things. One, as a transmission developer, we look at things like how we develop the projects and how would their construction and long-term maintenance and operation impact those communities. So we inherently are looking for ways to minimize impacts, and particularly on disadvantaged communities, which we have done with Propel New York Energy. So that's one thing. The second thing I would say is we have, as a transmission developer, for the type of transmission we do, which is competitively bid, goes through a very detailed process, goes through public permitting. Our imperative is to keep costs low. So we have cost caps on all that we do, and we are always looking for efficiencies to minimize the impacts on folks, which is a huge benefit and is not common necessarily in all aspects of energy development. And then I would say the third thing is in our procurement practices, which I think Kaela was kind of talking about, we look for ways that we can make sure that procurement practices take into account bringing benefits to the local communities through the hiring process, which again is all competitively bid out. So there's a multitude of other kind of community benefits that I don't think are typically come top of mind that are regularly occurring throughout our day-to-day work on these large projects.
Charles?
Yeah, so that sounds like, and just for a lack of a better word, the usual practice. Because if we keep on doing the usual practice, we're going to keep on getting the same results. So we have to somehow get a little bit more innovative in this process. I understand there's caps. I understand those things are important and competitive importance, but those competitive importance have left out the disadvantaged community countless times. So, and saying that, we just need to figure out different ways in which that can take place. Historically, we know that disadvantaged community hasn't been in unions. And when you think about the MWBE and having a company come from a disadvantaged community to be a part of that, that takes a lot of structure, a lot of will. Take it from me, I've actually started a solar company to install solar in New York State. Because my guys couldn't get jobs because we trained them all. I've taken on a huge burden with that process. It's not easy. So to have some, and that's just solar. We're not talking about infrastructure lines. We're not talking about, some high level stuff that you guys are talking about. These things are really impactful to our economic development. But somehow we have to figure out a way in which we can address those issues and not do. If we do the same thing we've done, we're going to get the same thing we've always gotten. So somehow, Transco, Nyberg, we've got to figure out a different way and a different path to get these, and also when to figure out a different way to get these things different. Because if it's not different, then it's not going to change. So anybody want to respond to that? Then I'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you're absolutely right that we have to do things a little bit differently. I think that not a little bit, a lot differently, right, to get different outcomes. And I think that, we've been working very closely with our supplier diversity team, our strategic supplier diversity team. And they have a lot of programs at NYPA that really go to try and, build that network of suppliers. For instance, and at different stages of sort of business ownership. So if you're still at early stage business development for small and local businesses, we have that capacity building program. It's almost as though it's like a little mini MBA where we're helping contracting, procurement, legal, project management, really coaching organizations at the very early stages. And then mid-size, we have the surety bond training to help obtain or augment small businesses and strategic suppliers so that they can increase their capacity on large projects and the construction projects. And so that's a way to try and make sure that we don't have the same answer the next time that a large infrastructure project comes that communities don't have, or small MWBEs don't have the surety bond or the compliance or the insurance requirements. And then last but not least, we launched a mentor protege program so that our implementation contractors, the large developers that normally apply and work on NYPA contracts, would sort of mentor some of the, and have that one-on-one relationship, mentor some of the smaller businesses that are just starting out and those are ready to take on these businesses. And so those are some of the ways that we are trying to be very, very intentional in not just having those procurement opportunities available, but building that pipeline of developers, contractors, suppliers from the community, and making sure that it's not just people that come out from outside of the community to do these jobs.
Hey, Charles, just wanted to add a quick point. I think it's one thing that's always kind of interesting to me. I'll just break it down. I used to get with sport contracts, right? And it's specifically the NFL. It would be like, I don't know, $20 million contract. And then when they break it down from taxes and then what's guaranteed or what's not, you come to find out, Michael Vick just talked about this in a documentary, you're really only getting about $5 million. So it's a huge breakdown, but that opening statement sounds like a lot. Most recently, Jay-Z just made an announcement that $250 million in community benefits would be going through if the Hard Rock Casino comes to Midtown. Completely different industry, but talking about community benefits. It really, really hit the culture huge. It was on every single platform. But when you say these big numbers, $250 million community benefits or $500 million, a lot of times the community just looks at it as like, all right, well, where is that money going? Where is it? We've never seen this. So I do think similar to jobs is if there was a way to kind of be more transparent on what that actually looks like when it gets down to the community, and then who is getting that. If the school district is getting that, or if they're not, is the library getting that? Is the local government getting that? Are there contractors or community-based organizations? And so if you say $250 million, how much is going directly to this organization? And what are they supposed to be doing? How much is going to this local municipality? How much is going to these general contractors? And then who are they subcontracting? So there does need to be some accountability to that community benefit announcement and that main number, because it just builds a lot of resentment towards those that are impacted when they never see $250 million or let alone $1,000.
Not even a T-shirt.
Not even a T-shirt. It's literally.
All right. Anybody want to comment on that? And we can move forward.
Yeah, I'll just briefly say that, Dan, you're 100% correct. And I think the burden on that that's really on the developer. That's for us to communicate that. You know, we have statisticians and folks that work on this sort of stuff, and it's up to us to track that, because to your point, you know, Charles, not everyone's getting the T-shirt, not everyone's getting the job. That doesn't mean that it's not happening. I think you're right, Dan, that a lot of that stuff does get kind of diluted, and it's like, well, you know, did it actually happen? I think that can be true. I think it's up to the developers that are you know that are working on these projects to communicate that out, and not just to communicate it out, but to communicate it through trusted parties like yourselves.
Right, that will work, and that way we have accountability and and we can see everything that's taking place. So that way, when we understand, then we get a better understanding how this works, right? Because if we don't educate our people how it's all working, then they get disconnected, and they're like, oh, whatever, man. We want you to. I want you to get this job. You're like, whatever. I've tried this before, and it doesn't work, right? It's that hurry up and wait situation again, and without any accountability. So we need to make sure we do that. Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not taking up all the time, so I'm gonna move on to the next questions. What are your plans and approach for community outreach? We kind of went over this again, so I just kind of want to glaze it over, and then we have a couple more questions. I think we have a couple more questions, and then we'll go to questions answering. So yeah. So let's talk about the outreach. And maybe I'll change it. What has been most effective approaches in your outreach to get the results that you're looking for? How about we change the question?
So I can jump in a little bit. I think the more local you go, the better information you get from folks that live in the community and that have particular viewpoints of how traffic or some of the impacts from eventual construction would affect their daily lives. So that means being present at civic association meetings, going to faith-based organizations when they're holding events, actually participating in some of the very local activities that are going on, so you can talk to residents and businesses and employees of those businesses to better understand what their priorities are. That is also, I think, reflected in talking to also local elected officials who are representing some of these constituencies and kind of piecing the full picture together of what community priorities are, what community concerns are, and then reflecting that in your project outcomes. So the more local, the better as far as transmission, development, and execution is concerned. We are large projects. We serve more than just the region, but it is important to get the day-to-day perspectives. So that's my thought from our experience on Propel. Kaela? Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that meeting the communities where they are, and and making sure that I think Dan made a great point. We're at a historical point. I don't think we've had this much investment. I think it's Climate Week. We I don't know how many acronyms I heard: GGRF, IRA, IIJA, grid resilience, all of that. Translating all those acronyms and understanding what it means to apply and to access all of this funding, it has to be broken down to a level that you can digest. I mean, even for the TSET fund, it took a panel of very sophisticated energy professionals to access this funding. And so we have to really think about, and I know the Department of Energy is thinking about this, capacity building, making sure that people understand what is this money, how is it, can it be accessed? Otherwise, to the point that you made, Charles, again, this historical investment will not flow to the communities that are needed most and who it was designed to benefit most. And so that's one of the things that's really struck me as I go to all the different Climate Week events. It's an acronym soup, and it's complicated to access and to understand. So that's really what we try to do, to make sure that it's really hands-on, tangible community education in the language that the communities are that's the language that they speak, but really breaking it down to the lowest level, because it's complicated even for energy professionals.
Anybody else besides myself want to comment?
Yeah, I'll chime in for just a few. I think one thing that we've noticed is there does seem to be a segment of the community that if you put a post or an outreach or an email for a specific opportunity, they will respond. However, that's usually an individual that's somewhat already engaged or focused or has a above average passion for this work. That's not the broader context of the communities that we're looking to really serve and impact. So again, to go back to my first point, that usually takes about 5 to 12 interactions with somebody to really get them to understand the power and opportunity that these things have or can have for their life. So sometimes we have to get their intention with other things that are just more culturally relevant. That could be putting on the events that we do with well-known industry leaders, from athletes to entertainers to individuals that are in finance, earn your leisure. There's a lot of things that are really having an impact on the culture. And so then we can have those discussions and then talk about what does climate justice look like? What does careers in a green economy look like? Because they may be just thinking about potentially becoming an engineer or getting into labor, but are not passionate about the climate. They haven't really put that together yet. So those that are passionate, yes, that's a lot easier to kind of guide them through the door. But when we're talking about individuals that have been underserved and impacted, again, there's a lot of different things going on in that processing, and they're just trying to get a job or just figure out how to make good money and really figure out their purpose. And so that takes a lot of strategy and just kind of putting together, curating really, really dope events that are just getting their brain engaged with something that they feel can really help with that inner voice that's going on in their head.
I could have said it better myself, Dan. I think that really thinking about being innovative, and when you get a bunch of kids together, such as different events like basketball tournaments, and maybe doing some science projects on the other court, right? Instead of playing basketball, having a small wind turbine and understanding, let the kids understand how it works, because exposure is key, right? If we don't expose our kids to all these different opportunities, they don't know what's out there. You're talking about a disadvantaged community. Disadvantage, that means that they don't see everything that they need to see to actually take advantage of it. So we need to actually really start thinking outside the box at that age and giving them opportunities and letting more professionals explore these kids, and kids who explore these professionals, and having those type of things. So,
Yeah.
you know.
So both Charles and Dan, I actually, I mean, I agree with you. I think that, as part of some of the STEM education that we do, that's exactly the approach. where, you know, you have, if you're trying to build an electric vehicle, they build little electric vehicle models, and then they have a race, a solar car race, or an electric vehicle race, you know, built at a small level. But another point that I would make, or you have a wind turbine design competition, and you see which group will make, you know, produce more power. And so those are some of the innovative ways that we reach to the point that you made. Sometimes we work with youth that are at risk, that have been targeted to as risk of dropping out of school. So we have to capture their imagination in different innovative ways. And so some of the ways that we've been experimenting with, to the point that you made. But looking at it at a different level, for instance, as we know, disadvantaged communities have a lot of cumulative effects. For instance, you know, food justice and food deserts intersects with environmental justice communities. So we try and engage communities at, you know, the cumulative effect that's affecting them most. So, for instance, we talk with the Black farmers in different parts of the state. And then it becomes, the energy industry is also another avenue that you know, you can engage with. So meeting communities with what, you know, the challenge that they're experiencing most, I think. Let me just to bring another aspect to it, about ways in which we found engaging successfully.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on this until we move on to the next? Okay. So I think the last and final question is a huge question. Yeah, let's read it. There is a diversity problem in the clean energy sector. In the last 2024 DOE Energy and Employment Report, Blacks continue to underrepresent in energy sector. What will be done or should be done to ensure that people of color from disadvantaged communities get a well-paying, family sustainable job? I know it's big, and this is the last question. So who would like to jump on this one?
That's huge. I'm just going to repeat, I think, some of the things that we've said, because it sort of, your question culminates in a lot of the conversation we've been having. One, I think as developers, it's incumbent upon us to have hiring practices that encourage that diversity and seek that diversity into our companies. And two, I think the education dialogue that we've been having today about getting into the communities early, often, regularly sharing information, not only to, I think it was said, to excite folks about the industry and get early minds focused on this, but to continuously share the job opportunities that are out there in the career field that is exciting and diverse and offers many opportunities for good paying, family sustaining jobs. I think that's incumbent upon us to do that education. And that's something that I know we've been working with NYPA on doing in the communities throughout the Propel project. There's probably a whole host of additional items, but those are the first two things, since we had mentioned them before, that I just wanted to re-raise.
I
Yeah,
can jump
absolutely.
in. Right.
Yeah, it's a massive question, and we all have to not just play our part, but over deliver on our part to do this. I think, you know, you're not going to see, you know, fossil fuel companies kind of, you know, break old habits. You know, they're theoretically not going to be developing much more energy generation. So it's really up to clean energy players to really, you know, correct these kinds of injustices that are, let's be real, you know, not just in the energy sector. I mean, this is everywhere. And so, you know, down to the details here, I think just to share, you know, for us, it goes back to what I said before, is that we have to set targets. We have to set targets, and then we have to measure them. So for example, this workforce program that I mentioned earlier, where we're preparing New York union workers to go and do the offshore installation work, which is relatively new work. I mean, you have some of those workers doing that work for South Fork Wind, but before that, this is not a job sector in the United States. Has been in Europe, but not in the US. And so there really hasn't been a workforce. So that's our opportunity to start from square one, particularly with folks in the Black community who haven't had these career opportunities in the past. And so I'm happy to report that in this group of 150 or so workers that we've prepared for offshore work, so that they can get easily connected with those jobs when they come out later on this year and the early part of next year. We're at 20% folks who are Black and 35% people of color in that pool, which is well above the population average in Nassau and Suffolk counties, where these folks are coming from. So again, having to over deliver and then using our contracting power to basically, I'm not going to say demand, but I'm going to say strongly encourage our contractors to make good on those same goals, because they know that we're not only measuring ourselves, but we're measuring them.
So I would just also add that it's obviously in partnering with community groups like DANS, Minority Millennials, to try and ensure that we're reaching the populations that we're seeking to attract, right? We have been intentional. For instance, you're absolutely right in the question that you posed, that there is a diversity problem in the energy sector and employment in general, to Erik's point. So we partnered with the National Society of Blacks in Black Engineers, the American Association of Blacks in Energy, Minority Millennials. We're looking forward to partner with you very soon. As soon as we met, we would love to partner with you, but really being intentional in ensuring that you are reaching the communities that the community-based organizations that are serving the populations that you're seeking to find. On a personal note, I'm a Black female engineer, African descent, definitely not been a straight line, but making sure in terms of career pathway, but making sure that even at the very youngest level, we're bringing representative role models. And if we don't have representative role models of the communities that we serve, then there's an indication that we have a problem. And so we're really trying to make sure that the workforce, not just at the project level, but at the long-term level, really reflects the communities we serve, but also includes our community members as well.
Yeah, I would just add, and I'm looking forward to working with you, Kaela, and the organization and figuring out what that looks like. But I'm very curious when I hear those things, is to me, again, in the work that we've been doing in a very short time, it seems to break down into like two sides. So to Erik's point, I would be curious of what that number was when it comes to skilled labor, because that's really being able to open up more seats and get specifically people of color, but Black individuals into these seats, so that they're prepared to get into skilled labor and these pre-apprenticeship programs. That's kind of like, and then also having a relationship with the locals and the proper almost introductions to ensure that these seats are filled the right way. And that's a whole almost local political strategy in itself. The other, though, is more so management and admin, because that's also knowing the HR director. A lot of that is relational. And so as an organization, that when we're doing recruiting, we always try to make sure that we're directly communicating with the HR director, because they can say yay or nay to a resume. They can block an interview, and we have seen that in the past. And so I would just be curious if it's the large percentage of that number was skilled labor, or is that management and administrative positions? Because then that can also help us kind of make sure that we're decreasing that gap if we had a better understanding of which industry is there an inequity within the jobs.
Yeah, it's a great question. Those numbers I was referring to before, those are all skilled union folks. Don't have the number in front of me on more management side positions, but can definitely try to find out.
Well, not even just for Orsted. I'm just talking to Charles's question on the broader industry, because that's, I would say with management and admin positions, that's more so of the HR department and those that are doing external affairs and relationship building with the community. They have to be accountable to that.
Yes, they do. And I think it's very important that when we talk about the skilled labor stuff, I mean, everyone, you can become a skilled labor, but you have to go through apprenticeship programs prior to becoming a skilled labor. Right. So we should have those robust apprenticeship programs that look directly to those disadvantaged communities and hiring those people. Right. The job before, right. Knowing that that's coming down the line, knowing that stuff is going to be happening in a couple of years, we should be looking at that. And then also it's really having those other entities such as companies that can actually hire those people to do those jobs, right? Because if you don't have those minority-owned businesses to be on the minority-owned business for Propel and others to be hiring, then it doesn't really happen. It's really simple. People hire who they know, right? That's who they know, who they deal with. So if we don't have those minority businesses in those positions to hire people of color, and then those minority businesses don't get hired by Propel, that's how it kind of works. And that's been the whole process for many years. So I just want to make sure that I give everybody else another time. If anybody else want to comment on that, or we can move on to the next question. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So we're at we got 9 minutes left for Q&A. Anastasia, I know you've been working hard taking things in the chat. Can you help me out and have any questions that we have missed, or anything that we want to discuss for the last 9 minutes of this discussion?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Anastasia Gordon. I'm the Federal Policy Director at REACT. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A box, largely around workforce development and one about a bit about energy justice. The first one is, what is Transco investment in workforce development in the areas that they are working in? And I think we've covered that a bit, but anything else you'd like to reiterate, maybe Shannon or Kaela?
No, I do think we have covered it quite a bit. I will say, because we are at the early days of our project, I would encourage folks to please keep your eyes and ears open, because there will be more workforce opportunities coming probably in 2025, the summer of 2025. As I mentioned, everything is competitive within what we are bidding out and pushing out there. So we'd love to share this information with WEACT and other folks as we get some of these opportunities on the street. And then, of course, when that DOE grant comes through, we're waiting for all the details, crossing fingers, crossing toes. I think that offers another opportunity to look at things even beyond Propel New York Energy.
I would just add that beyond Propel New York and beyond our partnership with Transco, NYPA recently received expanded authority to work on to contribute up to $25 million annually to the Department of Labor for Workforce Development. And so we're just in the beginnings of thinking about what that looks like, to the point that I believe Dan made and Charles made, how is this going to be different? So how do we partner with community-based organizations, with apprenticeship programs to develop and utilize and re-envisage workforce development? And so we're at the beginnings of that. We started our RFP closed, but we're looking for the next RFP, and we really will be very intentional in reaching out to community-based organizations, so that we can start to begin to address some of the challenges that Dan and Charles so eloquently put together.
Wow, that's a big investment, and I hope we can follow up on that for sure.
I will add. Go ahead.
No, I was going to move on to the other question. Did you want to respond to that?
I just want to say it's also important that that somehow we get these small MWB companies that we have projects so they can hire people, right? So the money, the DOE is all great. But if there is nobody out there to hire them with projects, then it doesn't translate, right? So we need to figure out a way in which we can have these small companies kind of measure up, start doing small projects, and then hiring those people from DOE as training to actually complete jobs, right? And yes, and I think sometimes it's tough for different organizations or um, uh, uh, government organizations to help out small businesses, but that's something that we have to figure out, in which there's got to be a way in which that can take place. Because hiring all those EOP people and giving all that money, and then you train them, then there's no projects to go for them. It's not going to be good. So, all right, go ahead.
Great. So I'm gonna skip to the third question that we got in the Q&A, and then go back to the second. This is more of a suggestion and question. Have you tried focused email campaigns to maintain connections and interest with those that are looking for these clean energy jobs, providing updates on the jobs they've shown interest in and informing them and new opportunities? So talking about some effective outreach and for folks that are seeking clean energy jobs. Erik?
Yeah, I'll just really briefly say, I'll put it in the link, that we have an early career hub. So obviously, it's not just for folks who are, just out of high school or just out of college, but it's a system that we have where folks can kind of sign up based on their interests to hear more about jobs as they come online. But again, really important for the folks on this call to reiterate that it is not just jobs at Orsted or jobs at Propel. It is about jobs at our contractors, and it is about getting that job before the job, as Charles put it.
Great, thank you, Erik. Anyone else wants to answer that? If not, I'll move on to the last question. Okay, so the second question, as I mentioned, is sort of an energy justice issue, and I'm curious how you all will respond. This person asks, why do you need to use transmission systems when individual businesses, homeowners, cities, and counties can utilize renewable energy they could produce themselves? It would seem that this only benefits large industries at the expense of taxpayers and requires the future rate hikes we all experience. So anyone wants to touch on that, Shannon?
So we've yet to figure out a good way of taking large amounts of energy and to move them from where they're created long distances to where they're consumed. In most cases, energy generation is not happening, right outside your door. There are instances of that, certainly, but in a lot of cases, we're moving power from places that are far away and bringing it to the local level. So I do think that we're looking at an all of the above strategy, right?
I'm the one who's frozen. Why am I frozen?
We're looking at folks utilizing, distributed energy. We're looking at offshore wind. We're looking at all of the above strategy here as we go through the transition. But transmission is a key part of that. It would be like, taking highways out of the equation of our transportation system, and it frankly wouldn't work for supporting the economy that we have, supporting large employers, supporting the cities and the rural areas that we have. We do need this all of the above, and transmission is a key piece of that core infrastructure within the energy delivery network. So that's been in existence for a long time, and we agree that there's great opportunities for local generation in your own homes or businesses, but we need an all of the above strategy to make sure we can support our economy and healthy communities moving forward.
Thank you, Shannon. That's it for our Q&A questions. Charles, I'm giving it back to you to close us off.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who participated, and thank you very much. I think this was a wonderful panel, and I would like everyone to take the time out and just kind of say kind of give a word of 1 word or 2 words of what you thought about the panel, and was it something that you would, give information about the panel and something you enjoyed or didn't enjoy? Okay. Erik, I'm gonna let you go first.
Yeah, I think we need more of this, and I think we need more regular engagement. I think that's the key to build trust and to build shared understanding of how these projects work and how community benefits work. So I think, you know, just mainly thank you to We Act and everyone who's attending for taking part in this. So thanks.
Then I'm gonna go back with Dan.
Love the conversation. I think it's very welcoming to have a transparent conversation about thoughts that a lot of people in the community feel and sometimes can't express themselves. So it was a good opportunity for us to even advocate for some of the frustrations and the positive outcomes that we've seen. But we're lucky, I think, in this specific moment to have individuals like Erik and Kaela who were just meeting, and Shannon and some of the other decision makers that I've met that are forward thinking and are inclusive, because we haven't seen that in the past. And so it's good to have these conversations without being on the back end then blocked or kind of knocked off the opportunity scheme because of just the general things we've seen. So it feels good to have an open conversation. Thank you, Charles. And thank you, We Act.
All right, thank you. And Kaela, then I'm going to let you close it all up. Okay, Shannon, you get the last word.
Thank you. I think everyone said thank you for the opportunity to participate. Again, I'll just say we're at a historical moment of just immense investment, and just making sure that the investment goes to the right places. This is the type of opportunity and the opportunity for strategic partnerships that needs to happen to make sure that we're partnering with the community-based organizations that are trusted and are equipped to deliver and make sure that the investments flow. So thank you again. Looking for more conversations like this.
Okay, Shannon, you were it.
All right, no pressure, right, Charles?
No pressure, Shannon.
And no, thank you to We Act. It's clear your leadership in bringing conversations like this about is how we're going to get all of this done. Bringing a diverse group of folks to the table to talk about planning and implementation and what that means for our communities and our workforce and our future. Kudos to you all for being on the front lines of this. And we look forward to continuing the conversation so that we have a lot to celebrate in the years to come.
All right, thank you all, and all just make sure you do the rest of your Climate Week agenda, and thank you very much for participating. Have a great afternoon.